Okay, so I went ahead and finished the scratches and cuts on the armor on top of the rusted parts that we painted up here last. And I decided on whether I want to paint the metal parts in non-metallic or metallics, and I have decided for non-metallics because I feel like it can be an interesting challenge to paint non-metallic on a rather rotten miniature, and we will see how that goes. So I have already painted those parts in a mixture of red leather that gives us the slightly salmon red touch in the brown, in the base brown, and the other part is Dubai brown, both from scale color again. And you can see the mixture here, and I'm already one step ahead after I put down the base coats. So starting from a rather even base coat, I'm mixing in orange brown by Vallejo model color, just to see how that looks. I want to mix it up a bit. I don't want to just go for white highlights because that will turn the copper more pink than I think I want in the end, but we will try. I'll probably do different areas in different colors or slight color variations. And yeah, since we have both this side and this side decided as the lighter halves of this leg, I think I'm just going to stick with it, and I'm starting with a 50-50 mix roughly of my base color and that orange, again starting and pulling pigment away from the darker areas to the light areas. And we can already start putting in some color up here. Again, if it's an edge that faces upwards, or also down here, we can cover that more boldly. We don't have to do much blending there, because this will catch a lot of light. Don't forget to let your color dry before you decide on whether you like the approach or not, because the color will definitely get more darker as it dries. So we're going to treat this as our midtone on the way to our highlight color. Again, just glazing over this and creating a gradient. Also keeping our darker part next to that really light part, but we still cover the areas that point up. And then, as this is a round sphere, we also want some reflections down there. Just don't overdo it. Put in just one reflection like this. Okay, then I'll put in some more orange for the higher up parts, or the lighter parts rather. Don't forget, always start at those areas that are probably going to be lighter, in this case the edge. Okay, the other side. And also down here, covering less ground, but intensifying that reflection that we would have from the lower half of that sphere. Okay. Right, so we already set up light and dark. That means and our midtone. So to try now, what we are going to try is play a bit with light and put in a bit of white. And what we first can try to do, even though I kind of like this already, we can play a bit with more intense orange tones. So I have the Scruffulous brown. How would you? There's a couple of different colors that you could use here. We can also just mix in a bit of Sahara yellow. And work with that, or try, like I said, that more intense orange. I'll try to come up with an equivalent. Yeah, just to intensify a few parts here. You can see that the intensity increases a lot. But we are still only just building up color and no lights. Well, of course, a tiny bit of light, as we have established that this is a reflection, but this is just setting up the bass tone, the midtones, for the actual light that comes later in the form of adding white. Okay, I'll just do the same thing on one of those trims. So again, use the base color, mix in a bit of orange. I'll just take that trim because it's on the same foot. It's starting up here. this is where I put most of the color undiluted, and then we just cover more area up here, and then move down and be a bit more careful with how much we cover, and try to focus on the upper edge. Also here, this edge, the one that's facing up, would catch more light. You want to acknowledge that. And I'll just go ahead and do this just the way that I did it up at the knee pad. You can also mimic, you know, the whole thing of this being a round sphere too, and having reflections down here. Well, not a sphere, but a cylindrical object is what I was trying to say. So we'll have some reflections down here, like I said. Just don't make those reflections the same strength as the one facing up. Okay, so this gives us a copperish result. Now you guys are cheating because you are so up into, or well, focused into that miniature, because you can see that it's not really, I just didn't bother painting this down here at the moment, because I'll just go back in and shade that down once we work with the shadow colors, and that will draw everything together a bit more. Right, so mixing in a bit of that yellow, as you saw, to build up the lights again. And I'm covering a bit more area up here, just to intensify that light where it would probably catch the most. That's an interesting effect that you can paint. You can also have like two reflections there, just this one as a bigger circle, then another one next to it, and then maybe have a reflection here, or a light point here, and we can also focus some reflections down here again. Okay, and also coming back to the knee pad, I decided that I want a sharp reflection here on this edge. And again, when we are dealing with round or rounded edges, I usually pick a spot right next to the middle. That's going to be my lightest area. So doing the same over here, this is going to be my lightest area. And then we can also paint a bit of a lighter area here, and then just vary the intensity of light on this part of the miniature, or of the shoulder pad. Doing the same here, by the way, so just while I'm covering more space here, I still want here in the middle to be the center point of the reflection. Okay, I think I still want to play with this. Some more like there. Okay, again, now it's time, and I'm carefully adding a bit of white, and if I haven't mentioned it, I'm using Schminke Super White because the pigmentation is really high and flow is still pretty good. So yeah, it's both the intensity and the way it behaves that I prefer it over, for example, scale color. So if you just do one upgrade of color, then definitely go for that Schminke White. Okay, so here you can see, I hope you can see that this is now becoming a tiny bit more pink. So we accept that in the lights. Don't want pink to be our main color because the orange kind of adds to the variety of color in that copper that we are trying to mimic here. But we definitely want some of that salmon color to shine through, and here we're just establishing a light now. Again, don't be start on. Okay, this was a bit too much, I feel. Then again, like I said, always don't be scared right away, leave it to dry, and if you're still unhappy, then just go over it again with a glaze of the color that we had below. But this seems fine here. Okay, then going with the area where we said we want some reflection here, carefully putting that in. Okay, so for example, I have the feeling that this is maybe a bit too harsh. So what I do is I still paint all the lights that I want to be there. And I embrace that it's probably too light. Even though, yeah, maybe it's not that bad. But just for the sake of finishing what I started explaining, I just clean my brush, and then I go back in with some of that more medium color, and I mix it rather light, and then I just go over and cover the whole thing, cover the whole area, and that draws everything together a bit more again. Because usually what happens if you apply a glaze over a part where you think your highlight went too harsh, what you will get is the glaze leaving the darker areas and the lighter areas to shine through, and then the lighter areas will also make the glaze lighter, and the darker areas will make the glaze darker, and like that you keep your gradient intact. Okay, again, since this is supposed to be rather rotten material, it's also not a big deal to have some texture in it. So for example, when we put in more lights by adding a bit more white, we can again apply those whites as dots. Sort of like there's some imperfections in the material, and light is just catching on to those. Right, intensifying this edge. I'll go as far as putting a pure white dot here, just to have the most intense area here. Maybe this is a bit too shiny, so let's tone that down. Okay. Alright, so I think that works. So now I mustered enough guts to also try that on the larger part. I forgot to paint this up here. Just doing the same, putting my more pinkish color right here in the middle where we wanted more light anyway, and then I'll start up here. And applying more and more light, trying to somewhat keep the orange to shine through. Just fading the layer out where I think it was too harsh, and we can always go back in mixing a bit of a mid-tone between the two. And then cover that again, and I'm also just putting a bit of that color into that reflection down here. Okay, just trying to get that credible. Again, I feel like we lost a bit too much of that orange, so I'm going back in with a glaze. Also over here. Right, and I'm doing all the light before I put in the shadows because of reasons like this, for example, where I do feel like this edge is a bit too, too wobbly. So when we are putting in the shadows, I can go back in and correct that. But first, I want to try and see how much lighter we should go with this here. Just carefully putting on some light, then leaving it to dry, and then we will see if we can go on like this. Oh yeah, also something that I forgot, we do have these rivets here. I just want to touch those right now, and then I touched those with white here, so to have a bit of a rough reflection, and then I'm also going to be mixing a mid-tone again, and we will hit the lower side. Can you see that? Yes, you can. We'll hit the lower side of that rivet with a bit of that orange. The same way as the rest of that thing is a sphere, we still want some reflections on the lower side of a rivet, because that's also a sphere. One thing I feel like we forgot is this area here. So I'm just touching that up. We have most of the light area up here, so I'm putting in some light on these parts. Of course, we have some color creep down here, so let's suck that up. But I'm okay with the rest. Have some light here. Also make this a bit more intense. Again, we are starting in the middle, as this is where the most light would be caught, and then it just radiates out. And as you grow comfortable with this, you can, add a lot more parts like this into flat areas. For example, we could probably do another one over here, but I'll just try and finish the part here up with the shadows, and then I'll also do a bit more complicated shapes to show you what else you can do. Yeah, so I mean, I'm happy with how this looks. Again, we could probably go back in and also paint the lighter area here, but I'll just touch up the rest, and then I can still show you some more complicated shapes. Now, non-metallic metal usually employs the fact that we have rather light structures next to dark structures. So for example, another video that I'm preparing does feature this axe, and you can see that there's a lot of contrast going on. So we have a rather light area here and then a rather dark one here next to it, and that adds to the effect of being non-metallic. And that's what we are also going to try and mimic here. I'm going to be mixing the base brown with some black. And I'll be carefully darkening those areas that should be dark. So for example here, because that's the area right next to the lightest area. I want this to be rather dark. Just glazing some black over. Then we want this area to be dark. Also that recess. You can always draw your pigments towards the area that should be dark when you're shading, and towards the area that should be light when you are highlighting. Try not to lose your midtone, always keep a bit of the midtone intact. Okay, then these edges, not edges, these planes that face downwards can also darken. And then we have a few parts here. So this is facing down. This is facing down, and this is, our highlight in the middle, and that means we can, for example, make those parts darker too. Maybe these parts. So just try to find your middle ground between an interesting way to put lights there. And as I said, you can go wild with your ideas. You can paint in a lot more reflections than I did. For example, you could put one here. But like I said, I just wanted to show you the basic here. And I think it looks pretty good. And after that we can always go back in and paint some more reflections. And I'll just finish putting in the shadows, and then I'm going to be showing you what I mean. Right, so like I said, I want some shadows here. And as you can see, or as you saw, this is rather diluted color, or this was rather diluted color, but for parts like these that should be rather dark, I'm using a mix that has more pigment in it, and I'm just pushing color in here and have it stay there. Okay. Always make sure that you don't have too much color on your brush so that it doesn't run off and flow uncontrollably. Just let that dry. Okay, also this can be dark as per our pattern here, with this side being darker. Also want this edge to be next to a light area on the other side. So yeah, that's the basic idea behind it. You can vary your midtones in that copper and non-metallic any way you want. Put a bit more yellow in, put a bit more orange in, or maybe put a bit more of the white in. That will leave you, of course, with a bit more of an orange finish. I'm sorry, a pink finish, of course. I'll just end this video here, start a new recording just in case, because yesterday I did lose a bit of recording, so I'll be right back with painting the other side of the knee.